Hello, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Fujifilm X-T3 and the kit lens, the 18-55, 2.8 to f4. Let's get started. The Fujifilm X-T3 is a crop sensor mirrorless 26 megapixel camera with 425 focus points and a tilting 3-inch touch LCD screen. Because this camera is built towards shooting professionally, this camera does not feature any automatic scene modes, nor does it have a built-in flash. Though with its available hot shoe, you can purchase an external flash to provide better lighting when needed for photography. The X-T3 has a continuous drive of 20 frames per second, has 4K video up to 60 frames, and can charge via USB for on-the-go shooting. It also has a microphone port, headphone port, and is environmentally sealed. Fuji has a very classic design that puts a film camera in your hands with it actually being a high-end digital. I'll show you what I mean with this walkthrough, where we go through the buttons, doors, dials, and menus. Going over the X-T3 today, I was actually extremely impressed with this camera, more than I thought I was going to. As you can tell in my sample photos, the color was just very rich. The contrast, the balance between shadows and highlights, it just really nailed it. There was a lot of sharpness that I found in this camera, and you know, it's definitely worth what you pay for it. It's definitely one of the best Fujis that they have right now. Next to the XH1, which I know was clearanced out earlier, I believe last year. So hopefully they'll be coming out with a new one that's kind of a comparison to this. Something more updated, but we'll go ahead and get started here. So as you can see on the lens that comes with the camera, it's pretty nice because it's a 2.8 to 4 aperture. It's not a standard 2.8, naturally that's going to cost you a little bit more money, but it's kind of nice that you have that option. A lot of kit lenses right off the bat will come with like a 3.5 to 6.3 option, which is okay but not great. Having a 2.8 option at all is pretty excellent when it comes to having a kit lens available. So this lens is pretty fantastic. It should last you a good long time before needing to go towards something a little different. Definitely help you get started. On the lens itself, it does have a couple switches. This switch here is going to be for the aperture. That is what that symbol means. It's that opening in the lens that controls that 2.84 all the way closed down to f22. So if you wanted to have control over your aperture, which you do just by moving this ring here, and it does have, if you hear closely, a slight click to it, which is nice. You can feel it as well when you're turning it. It's a nice confirmation that you're changing the aperture there. Otherwise, A in red is actually going to be automatic. You're letting the camera decide what the aperture should be. And we'll go over more on the shutter speed and ISO, but you can see that the red A does come here as well. And we'll cover that more here in a moment. It also has a OIS switch, which is going to be your optical image stabilizer. This is going to be stabilization in the lens. The body, a lot of people were disappointed it did not have in-body stabilization for this camera. But if the lens has it, it's gonna do you just as well, I think. So you have the option to turn it off or on. Now a lot of people would ask, why in the world would I ever turn it off? Well, if you put this on a gimbal or electronic stabilizer or even a tripod, that is actually when you want to turn off that stabilization. And the reason you want to do that is because the stabilization is built to counteract the shake that goes through our bodies, whether quite a bit or just a little bit of movement. So when you set it on a tripod or a gimbal, it may try and overcompensate and look for that shake and actually cause shake in your image. Now, you may not notice this on like video or something like that, but if you're doing a long exposure on a tripod, you will notice that maybe it's not as sharp when you do have the stabilizer on when it's on a tripod. Otherwise, if you're just shooting handheld, keeping it on should be perfect. Going over the front of the camera here, you can see that we have a little switch here, MCS. This is going to be for manual focus, continuous focus, and single focus. Okay, so single focus is going to be, let's put this over here. Single focus is going to be for locking onto a subject that's not moving. So someone posing, a landscape, a flower, something like that. C, continuous focusing, is going to allow the camera to continue to focus as the subject moves, so like sports or wildlife. And then you have manual focus, which allows you to use this front ring here to manually focus your lens to the point that you wanted to. So say if there was like a fox behind some tall grass, but naturally the camera just wants to grab onto the grass and not what's beyond it. You could kick it into manual mode and just dial in right past the grass and get that fox behind it. You know, so it really just depends on what you're shooting. This port right here, which was underneath this little cap, is actually a sync terminal. That's going to be for using Flash, if you wanted to integrate Flash in your setup, because naturally this camera does not have a pop-up flash. Although if you just wanted to attach a flash to the top, a sync cable isn't super necessary. It's only if you're really getting into the flash game, but if you're just wanting to get some extra light, you have your hot shoe right up here, which you can just attach a external flash to and use that. Over here, you can see that we have a button right below the lens. This is going to be for removing the lens from the body here. You can see that we have a red dot here. You can see that we have a red dot here on the lens as well as on the body itself. So you're going to go ahead, line them up, and click, and there you go. It's all attached. We do have a button right here up at the front. At the moment, it doesn't do anything, but I do believe it is programmable. It's going to be one of their function buttons where if you wanted to set this to do a specific setting, you just kind of click and hold, and then you can adjust the wheel back here to adjust what you need to. There is going to be a front wheel and a back wheel. These are going to adjust different things depending on what setting you have it on, so just keep that in mind. Going over the sides of the camera here, over on this side, we do have a little door here, which is going to be our card slot. This is going to hold 2 cards, 2 SD cards really, so it's nice. You can do JPEG to one, RAW to another, it can be overflow, whatever you want to do. And then we do have a little door above that, which is going to be our remote. If you wanted to do a shutter release for long exposures, that's going to be our corded port for that. On this side of the camera here, we do have another door. If we flip that up, flip that up, you can see that we have our mic port, we have our headphone port, we have our USB-C port, which is going to be both for transferring images to your computer. It's going to be for charging the battery if you don't have the AC charger or an AC port available. If you're on the go and you're like, shoot, my batteries are running low, you can get like an external battery pack, very similar to something like this, which is going to give you some charge and be able to charge which will be able to charge it in camera, which is nice. And then you have your HDMI port, which is going to allow you to connect this to a television screen or computer screen, or even you know, something that you can do like a projector. So if you want to show off pictures from your recent job or your recent vacation, something like that, you could absolutely do that with that. On the bottom of the camera, you can see that we have some contacts here. This is going to be for attaching a battery grip. So if you wanted to get the external grip from this to extend battery life, that is sold separately. We do have our universal tripod screw mount here that allows you to connect this to any tripod. And then we have our door here, which is going to be the battery area. Okay. And you can see that the contacts down there will line up here. So you just put that in and you're all set to go. The top of the camera. So this is where it starts getting a little bit more fun. We're going into a little bit more detail here. Over here is actually where you're going to find your ISO. So the thing about Fuji, as I kind of mentioned before, is that it has a very classic layout. If you ever shot with film, if you have an old film camera, something like that, that's where this is gonna kind of bring you back and kind of give you a little bit of that nostalgia factor, because you used to be able to change the aperture with the ring on the lens. You used to have to set your ISO or your film speed, if you're familiar with that, and you would choose your shutter speed accordingly. Now, this may look very similar to how a film camera is laid out, with kind of a nice classic rangefinder look, but it is full digital, and so that's why a lot of people tend to just love this, is because it has a very different layout in comparison to a lot of other digital or mirrorless cameras. So with it being laid out, as I kind of went over before, as you see the A on the lens for the aperture, the A on this dial for the ISO, and then the A on this dial for the shutter speed, if you have them all set to the red A, you're technically going to be shooting in automatic. Now, if you decide to choose your ISO, which you can do freely, you know, naturally lower numbers are going to be a sharper image, brighter day. Higher numbers, 1600, 3200, those are going to be for dimmer settings, indoors, evening, but it can also cause graininess if you go up to numbers like 12,800, which is pretty incredible. And then if you change your shutter speed, which you can go from bulb, which is helpful with that remote if you want to do long exposures, you have half a second, a fourth, an eighth, 15th, you know, you have 1/500th of a second, all the way up to 1/8000th of a second to control your speed. Now, if you leave your aperture in auto mode and you're just controlling your shutter, then that's technically going to put you in your shutter priority, right? On other cameras, you have a shutter priority mode, you have a aperture priority mode. It really depends on kind of what your goal is going to be. Now, if you're shooting sports or wildlife where you're wanting to freeze motion, you want to be in shutter speed priority. If you are doing Milky Way shots, or you want to get a long exposure of like your local city, someplace that's near you, where you get all of like the city lights, then you want to be in shutter speed as well. That way you can control how long it holds that window open for you. And of course, you do have this lock button on each of these dials here, which keep you from turning it on accident, which is really nice. And then of course, if you wanted to adjust just your aperture and you left this in auto, now you're in aperture priority. This of course is going to be for getting that nice blurry background, sharp foreground when you're doing portraits or close-up photography. It's going to be for low lighting situations, to let as much light in as possible. So it really just kind of depends on the goal at hand and kind of where you're at. We have a dial here, which is going to change our diopter through the viewfinder here. Because all of our eyes are different, if you wear glasses, that sort of thing, by adjusting this little dial, it can actually make this little window here clear for you to see through, which is a really nice feature. Then we have our viewfinder button, which is going to control the eye sensor, so having that available to automatically turn on or off. You have just the viewfinders. You can see that it actually turned on inside there. No screen. And then we have just the screen viewfinder turned off, and then now it's set to automatic. Okay. We have another function button here, which is also programmable to be whatever you want it to be, and that's changeable in the menu. We have our on and off switch here, along with our shutter button. If you push halfway down to focus, push all the way down to take a picture. And then we have our exposure compensation button here. So if we go plus numbers, you can see that it makes the screen brighter. If you go minus numbers, it makes the scene darker. So if you wanted to get a little bit more brightness or a little bit more darkness to your image without changing any of these major settings here, you could easily do that with this dial, which is really nice. We've also already gone over the hot shoe, so that is done and done. We'll go ahead and head over to the back. As you can see, underneath the ISO dial, there's actually going to be a ring here. In order to move that ring, there's actually a little knobby piece here and a knobby piece under this one, which we'll go over here in a minute, which will allow you to turn this. So our first option here is going to be a video camera. That's going to be, of course, for video mode. If you're not in this mode, you are unable to record video, so you have to switch over here if you would like to record a video, which you're going to be able to do just by hitting your shutter button down one time to start recording, again to stop recording. You have bracketing mode. You have bracketing mode, you have continuous high, which is the 20 frames per second, continuous low, which I believe is 10 frames per second. So if you hit this shutter button down and you just hold it, it'll take pictures at 20 frames or 10 frames per second. You have S for single, which means if you click and hold this button down, it's just going to take one picture at a time. You have this mode here, which is going to be a double exposure. So if you've ever seen two pictures merged into one with film, it was kind of a creative way to run your film through twice. So you got like a texture and a portrait, or something that just kind of, sometimes it didn't make sense, sometimes it made sense, and it just was a very creative, artistic way to shoot. You can do a double exposure with this camera. You have advanced filters here, and then you have a panoramic mode. Typically for everyday shooting, you just want to stay in the S for single shooting. And then of course the option under the shutter speed dial is going to be your metering mode, where it's taking the light from. So you have your spot metering, you have your center weighted, you have your evaluative, which is going to take it from the majority of the screen. And this one is going to be like average, like it takes the general average and kind of balances out throughout the whole image. If you would like to know more about metering, take a look at my metering video underneath my camera basics playlist. I think that you'll find that extremely helpful. Of course, we have our viewfinder here, which we've already kind of gone over a little bit, something that you bring your eye up to instead of being focused on the screen. We have our trash can button, which is going to help delete images when we're on our playback mode. Our playback mode is going to be able to access our memory card, which I don't have one in there, so it's not going to access anything. And it's going to show us our pictures, and if one came out blurry, if you accidentally took one, if someone's blinking, you can always go through, use the trash can to delete it, just to get it out of the way. You have your auto exposure lock button, which allows you to lock in a certain light balance in a certain area, so you can ensure that it's going to come out correctly. You also have an autofocus lock, which is going to lock your focus in a certain area. If you wanted to put it, you know, off to the side of the frame, or if the camera's not exactly focusing exactly where you would like it to. This is touchscreen, which is nice when it comes to the LCD screen. Right now it's on a touch to focus. If we hit this little tab here, right now it's just kind of moving the focus point around. Area focus. And then you have off, so it's not going to do anything. And then you also have one where it's going to focus and take a picture, which is kind of interesting. So you have a few different options with this. I'm going to turn it off for now just so I don't accidentally hit the screen. But on the screen itself, you can see that we have different things on the screen here, which is my favorite screen to use, where it just gives you your general settings here, what the shutter speed's at, what your aperture's at, what your ISO is at, your battery level, your exposure compensation. you know, if you're shooting in RAW or JPEG, if the Bluetooth is on, that sort of thing. If we want to change the look of this screen, we hit our display button, which gives us a very plain look. It gives us just information here. And then we're back to this one here. And personally, like I said, I like to have this one just in case I want to use the screen. We do have a Q button here. This is going to be your quick menu. When hitting this, you'll see that it pulls up a lot of your more regularly changed options. So here we have our custom modes, which you can save certain settings if you would like to do that. It could be certain like film settings, like if you really like to shoot a very specific black and white sort of look that's very contrasty or has more gray to it or something like that. You can customize all that through changing the film mode, and also you can change the tone, the brightness, the sharpness, all of that in camera, so you can really kind of customize how you want to shoot your pictures, which is nice, and save it to a custom mode. You have your autofocus mode, which is going to be where it's autofocusing. So if you want to use all 400 and I think it's 25 autofocus points, if you just want a general zone, a smaller zone, or right there in the center, a very specific point, that's all up to you. You have your dynamic range and how strong you would like that to be. You have your white balance, which it controls the temperature of the photo, a little bit warmer, which means yellow, or a little bit cooler, which means blue, depending on the situation. Auto is really good at determining what that should be, but in situations where maybe, you know, you're in a building that has yellow walls and yellow lighting, and naturally your pictures are coming out yellow, you can adjust your white balance to add more blue to ensure that you're actually going to be getting white areas, which is going to be more accurate. You have your film simulation, so if we were to change that, you have sepia, you have different black and whites with different filters like yellow, red, green filters, Artistia. I mean, it's all very film based, which you can also get by going into the menu. As for a lot of these, your quick menu just gives you very quick access to change that. You have your image quality. I like to shoot in RAW, but you can choose RAW, JPEG, or RAW and JPEG. The image size, which in RAW all you have is RAW. If you're shooting in JPEG, you always want to shoot in large quality JPEG. Your noise reduction, which is controlled here, your highlights, your shadows, your color, your sharpness. You can adjust all of that while you're shooting, which is why a lot of landscapers love this camera, because you do have that ultimate control to kind of adjust here and there, and knowing that the landscape isn't going anywhere, you have time to play with that. You have brightness, you have a timer, you have face and eye detection if you would like that on if you're taking pictures of people, and your flash setting, which of course is only going to be applicable toward the flash that you purchase separately. We do have a little joystick here, so if you didn't want to use your touchscreen, you can move around your focus area with the joystick. And then we're going to go ahead and go over and then these buttons here, which are usually directional buttons, can actually be programmed as shortcuts as well. So at the moment, with it being factory out of the box, if we push up, it's going to change where it autofocuses. If we press to the right, that's going to change our white balance, so it has pre-adjusted white balances for you, or you can do your own. We have our film simulation, so if you choose to hit left, instead of go to the quick menu here, you can see that by scrolling through the different film simulations, you can see that it's actually changing and giving you sort of a background preview as you choose which film simulation that you would like, which is kind of nice. Standard, of course, is going to be regular color, and it's ideal for just everyday situations. If you push down, that's actually going to be like a performance boost mode or normal mode, depending on what you're taking pictures of. And then the last thing we're going to go over here is actually our menu. So starting up at the top here, you have your image quality settings. That's what IQ stands for in this camera. So you have, again, your image quality, raw, your film simulation. A lot of these are available either on the outside of your camera or on the quick menu itself. So a lot of these I might skip over, just because we've already gone over them. No sense in, you know, going over them all over again. If you do have further questions about that, let me know. Also, if I skip over something because, you know, I don't think it's going to meet enough people that are going to want to listen through me rant about one specific setting, let me know in the comments below as well if you would like to learn more about something that I kind of go over. But a lot of the things in your menu, you may find that you're not going to change. That's why they have the quick menu. That's why they have the settings on the outside of the camera, so you don't get lost in this menu very much. So that is something to keep in mind. You can turn a grain effect on or off, the color chrome effect, again, your white balance, your dynamic range, highlight shadows, all of those that are connected to your quick menu. You have your color space, which you want to keep at sRGB. You have pixel mapping on this camera. You can select your custom settings. So if you want to save that base, the customs in the quick menu, like I showed you, and you can edit or save them as well. The next tab here is going to be your autofocus manual focus settings. So your focus area, your autofocus mode. You know, a lot of this is, again, on your quick menu. You have the autofocus illuminator, which on this camera is going to be this little light here, which will allow it to shine a little LED light out if it is either too dark or it can't focus on any specific sort of texture or detail. It shines a light out to help it out. You have your face and eye detection setting, autofocus manual focus, your focus checking, depth of field, touchscreen mode. You know, the next one here is going to be your shooting settings. So your drive setting here, that continuous high, continuous low on this ring. You have sport finder mode. You have self timer. You have your shutter type if you would like a manual shutter versus an electronic shutter. Your flicker reduction for video if you're doing it in fluorescent lighting, because fluorescents do flicker. Image stabilization mode, you want to keep that on continuous. ISO auto setting, which is going to give you a limit up to 32, 1600, or 1800, which I absolutely love that this camera has that option, where you can adjust the sensitivity and have it just set there, so it's one less thing you have to worry about. You have your mount adapter setting, and then you have wireless communication as well, so you can connect this to your cell phone or smart device if you would like to transfer pictures right from the camera to your smart device and share with your client, or share on social media or your website or whatever you want to do. You have your flash settings, which you have like red eye removal, you know, all of that, which of course is only going to be applicable again to that external flash that you'll have to purchase separate. You have movie mode, which changes the like HD to 4K, how many frames that you want, the compression, if you would like to just have a film simulation to that as well, your dynamic range. So a lot of the same things that we saw in image quality, it's just specifically for the video settings. So consider all of that, but just for video. And then you have movie silent control if you want it to be as quiet as possible, no beeping, nothing like that. And then we have setup, which is going to be like your user settings, your sound setup, if you want it to do a beep or adjust mic intake, that sort of thing, your screen setup, your button dial settings, so if you want to change any of these buttons or your function buttons, power management, if you want it to like save battery, save data setup, connection setting. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Fortunately, Fuji has one of the more simple menu setups that I've seen, where they just they give it to the point, and because the more The stuff that you usually wouldn't change often is in the menu itself, and they have a very simple layout to the camera to where you can easily find things that you would change more on a regular basis. It's pretty excellent. You do have a My Menu tab here, which you can go ahead and actually, there were settings that you'd like to change that aren't laid out on the camera and you want to have it under the menu. You can actually create a My Menu and put certain things in all these other tabs here in My Menu, so it's easy to find, so you don't have to scroll through every single one of these trying to find something. So it gives you even more customization options. And then the last thing that I did miss here is there is actually a little light here. This is going to indicate like if the battery is charged, if you're charging it in camera. This is also going to let you know if there's any activity going on. I do have an SD card video that I'm going to be releasing soon of the importance of high-speed SD cards. A lot of cameras these days have a little light option that lets you know if it's having a hard time getting through the activity. If you put a slow card in this camera, because it has a very fast processing power, there's a chance you're going to be seeing this light blink on that 20 frame limit, or on that 20 frame continuous drive, because it's going, hold on, I cannot save the pictures fast enough. However, if you put a fast card in, you should rarely see this light blink at you. You might see a flicker here and there to let you know it's saving, but you should never see it just standardly keep blinking at you for a good period of time. That usually means that you need a faster SD card, so keep that in mind. Other than that, that pretty much sums up the Fujifilm X-T3. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I was really impressed with this camera. I think they did a fantastic job with it. The pictures came out just gorgeous. If you guys have any other questions about this camera, if you want me to go over something specific, for another tips and tricks video, if you want me to go over a different camera, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to add it to my list. Until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.